Yep, we're live now.
All right. We are live. Okay. Took a bit of a break here. Today, we're going to talk about governance. But first, we are Gameonomics here, the gamer's guide to the metaverse. And yeah, as I said in this special episode, talking about governance, blockchain governance, and why it's important, what different forms of governance we currently have. Let me mute myself here. What current forms of governance we have, the current issues, advantages. So basically, this is going to be an episode where we talk about all about governance. We're going to learn more about it and how this kind of makes the blockchain space a better space and the threats it comes with. So we have here the boys, as always. We have the Turkish ambassador, RDZ, here around the world, in a trip around the world. We have Skaz. We have Skaz, who's also moving around here. We have Marek, our Polish destroyer. Myself, Daniel. It's going to be Daniel from now on. Show of Force too long. Daniel Show of Force is just going to be Daniel. And yeah, we're going to just jump right in, keeping that retention. And I know you are the resident expert here, RDZ. And so if you can, when we talk about blockchain governance, if you can briefly explain to us, for people who are not aware, who are not like as up to date, what do we mean when we talk about like blockchain governance?
Well, yeah, I think it's important to start with what is governance in the first place, and just to make it quite simple and straightforward. Who has power? Who gets to decide, and through what process? Those are the things that make governance make it what it is. And then you add in blockchain, you add in Web3, and it becomes a different form. I guess you could say a more evolved form of governance. So you've got something that is more decentralized. You've got something that is more direct and specific, unlike some forms of governance that have existed in history. So yeah, I guess when it comes down to what is blockchain governance, it's decentralizing power. It's decentralized decision making, and that's all it is.
Okay. My webcam, of course, it fucked up now after the stream started, not before. God damn it. Okay, I'm connecting to the matrix now. I'm uploading my consciousness. Should work.
But okay. Yeah, it's that's what it is. It's it's just it's like an evolved form of blockchain governance is an evolved form of governance that just includes a new aspect of decentralization.
I think we're gonna discuss how evolved it is, if it's actually evolved, like it is a like better version, or if it's just different. But so it's more like, it seems like it's just like it's traditional governance, which is like the way decisions are being made at the top for that specific maybe like organization. But and then when we're talking about blockchain, it looks like you're saying, hey, like we are bringing the values from blockchain, crypto, Web3, which is more like decentralized, more like code based, and we are bringing those values, that way of operating in governance as well. This
Correct.
Is okay. So why do you guys think, maybe like if you want to answer this, Roden, if not, like maybe Skaz, Marek, like why do you guys think governance is like an important aspect to talk about in like blockchain, in like blockchain systems, and also like in the different projects we're talking about? Why is this like important in these projects, the way it's set up?
Well, fundamentally, governance is important because it allows you to know what's happening. It allows you to not only know what's happening, but also be confident that things are being taken care of. And this is more important than ever in blockchain and financial markets, because there are serious amounts of money at stake, right? So let's say you
would you say
invest
the
in a
so like would you say the type of governance, or like how the governance is being structured has a direct impact in the success or failure of the project?
Yeah, I do, because if it gives governance make sure that there's an incentive not to fuck up. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole point of it, really. It's like not only to organize, not only to protect, but also so people don't fuck over other people. I think that's quite an important part of it as well. I mean, there's plenty of incentives in our markets not to do that anyway, but this is one of those incentives, because if you have people that are asking questions, if you have people that are looking into what you're doing, then there is an incentive there to present the correct information, present information that is that is good, that is moving forward,
Yeah.
and that's important. That's important for the success and failure of a project. If you have a project that doesn't do that, and it doesn't have governance or doesn't have someone to answer to, then it's just a free for all of fuckery that potentially can go south real quick. Now, that's not to say that that's every single project, every single thing, because obviously there are plenty of examples of something not being governed, or something that people that don't need anyone to answer to, and that project or that person is still successful. But this is just one of those extra incentives to add onto the other incentives for not
Yeah.
being a fuck up, essentially.
Yeah. I agree. I agree there that I do think as well, like governance, I think it's basically how decisions are being made, like who makes the decisions, how are those decisions voted on, how are they voted on. So I do think it's basically how a company is being run, how a project is being run, how an organization is being run. And yeah, I also think there is a direct correlation with the success or failure of that structure. So to go on here on this same point, to keep on the same point, Mr. Skaz, if you can tell us, I know you have quite a few, Roden, and you have, maybe we should like also let Roden with his passion and fire address this, but I want to like first get something from you as well, Skaz. If you can share some instances where governance like played a key role in the success or failure of a blockchain project, if we can like think about this like topic for a bit.
Well, just before we get onto that, I just want to quickly touch on why, like another point on why it's important. You like when we think about crypto tokens, one of the biggest utility comes from the fact that you have a say in a project. Now, obviously in the traditional space, when you have shares, you have a say in a shareholder meeting. But I think a lot of people would argue that the power shareholders have is not that significant. What we're seeing, particularly in Web3, is that people, I mean, it depends on the structure of it really just depends on the structure, right? If some projects are very decentralized and some aren't that decentralized. In the very decentralized one, and I guess this comes into an example with like Illuvium, you're voting, well, you're not voting specifically, but you've elected a bunch of council members to basically represent the majority, and they'll vote on important matters. Yes, to answer your question, yes, there's quite a few instances where an unfavorable proposal was made by someone from the core team or the founders, and we've seen the community kind of stick together, rise up, and show why these things are not good. Generally speaking, a lot of the time we have seen some favorable outcomes for everyone. However, it definitely has its issues, which we'll go into a little bit later on.
Yeah. Good. I like it. Okay. Roden, do you happen to have an example for us where maybe where governance contributed like to like some bad consequences on a project?
Yeah, I mean, I've I've done a video on this, but I think, and I guess this isn't really a good example. I was going to use the Arbitrum example as one of
that's what I was thinking.
bad governance, but that's not necessarily an example that I can use for a project. For a project that's gone south, right? Because Arbitrum didn't really get affected too much by it. People didn't really see it as a big thing, right?
Well, in the moment, it still had like a negative impact, right? In the moment.
Yeah. In that moment, it had a negative impact on its reputation. It had a negative news, I guess. But in the long term, it didn't really change how people felt about the project, which I found quite interesting. I don't think people really took it as seriously as it should have been taken. Mainly because the Arbitrum and just I guess I'll give a brief overview of it and a reminder to you guys of what happened. So Arbitrum basically had a vote that was going to send a bunch of their tokens. I think it was something like $700 million worth of the tokens. It could have even been more than that at the time. And it was going to send those tokens into their foundation for marketing costs, essentially, right? And that was, you don't need that much for marketing costs. It was essentially to pay people. It was essentially to distribute some of that money that they had made from the market release. And then they did that vote. Everyone voted against it, or more than 50% majority voted against it. I don't exactly remember what the percentage was, but it was a majority. And then they turned around and said, well, this vote actually didn't matter. We had already made the decision, and this vote was more of a I forgot the terminology that they used, but it was basically this was like a formality.
Yeah, formality.
Ratification. That's what they used. This was a ratification rather than a vote that had meaning.
Okay.
And yeah, that was particularly bad because obviously that goes against the vote. And you know, they later turned around and actually accepted the vote. They didn't do this, but just the fact that they had the nerve to turn around on their first vote and say we're not going to follow what you guys want is quite ridiculous. It's even more ridiculous when you take into consideration what that token does. And all it is a voting governance token. It's a DAO.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more concerning because if your only use case, your only use for your token is to vote, and then you go against that, well, what is it? What's the actual use of it? But anyway, so that's basically an overview of a case where governance was marketed as something so great, like, oh, look at us, we're going to be decentralized, and this is the new age, this is the future of all technology, and then they turn around and basically say it's actually worthless. It's not what we said it was going to be. Which should have, in my mind, significant impact on that project, but it didn't. The project still exists, and they're still very successful. But yeah, if they are willing to do that on their first vote, what are they going to do in the future? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It definitely creates a very bad precedent. Like you said, like that's the whole point of owning the token. So basically, well, for it to go up and you making a 1000x, but the utility of holding the token, I should say, was to like, hey, you can, and that's kind of like the whole like blockchain governance thing. Like, hey, you can have a role, you can have a say in the future of this project, and it wasn't really like that. So yeah, then why do you bring this utility? So yeah, definitely that was like I would say like pretty bad scenario. Still, apparently, I would say actors in this space are it seems like even less rational than actors in other spaces, and it did not really have a huge impact, like you said. And we can actually like transition to, I think it'd be the main point here, to the whole subject of like centralized versus decentralized governance. And this is like what a lot of like Skaz mentioned earlier. This is a lot of like what blockchain is proposing with the whole like tokens system and everything. It is a way to bring, I guess more democracy, bring more, again, decentralization to the decision-making process of a project, the future of a project, by you owning a token. So it's kind of like win-win. They sell you this token. A lot of the times the utility, or the main utility of the token is governance, which is you as a user, as an investor in the project, because you bought a token, you would have a say on where the project goes. And let's talk about, like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, as methods of governance. So actually, Rodon, can you briefly explain the difference between centralized and decentralized governance models?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the easiest way to explain this is with examples, right? So, yeah, I mean, a centralized government is something that has a central power, right? Which means that you know, there are a few people, and in a lot of cases there is one person that is making the final decisions and making most of the decisions within that body, right? Or within that
So that would be like maybe like a CEO of a company.
Yes, it would be a CEO. It would even be a president or a prime minister. So even within a democracy, you can get centralized governance. So even though you are voting in an individual, it's still centralized because there is one person making a decision on something. Although don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure on that one. But definitely like a CEO or an owner of a company, founders of companies, and it makes sense, right? If I start something, if I own something, I'm going to be the one that makes the decisions. Now, where things fall apart and why there's an argument for decentralization is when some of these individuals get very far down the track, and when they start having a great influence on a lot of people, or when you know, there are a lot of things at stake. And so the example that I used before, the comment that I made before about financial markets, right, and how important financial markets are for an individual's life, and how it can be quite a significant, you know, if you're looking at a significant thing that you're putting money into, you want it to be protected. And that's where the argument of decentralization sometimes comes into play, because a lot of the time with centralized governance, there are a lot of things that are hidden. It's very easy to hide things. It's very easy to
like a lack of transparency overall.
Cover up things. Exactly. Yeah, just a lack of trust overall. And we've seen this countless times, right? We've seen this in both government, you know, country governance, but also in business as well, where you have banks and various companies that have been proven countless times to be lying, to be releasing false documents. And yeah, within most legal systems,
so let me ask you a question here. Keep you on your toes. So do you think the issue there is more actually the lack of transparency, not necessarily a decentralized method of making decisions? It sounds like in these scenarios, the actual issue is like lack of transparency. So if, let's say, the government, like whatever the authorities, make a specific, hey, you guys need to be more transparent, like they coerce them by law, hey, you have to be more transparent, show all of this. Do you think a lot of that could be addressed that way, by adding more transparency to these like big institutions?
That's a good point. And yeah, I do think that. Yeah, I think that transparency is actually more important, in my opinion, than decentralized governance specifically. So a decentralized system is more important than a decentralized governance. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know what you guys would think about this, but are those two systems, do they have to coexist in the first place? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Ricky, you can have a comment on it. You would have a comment on this.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you bring up. So the question is can they be mutually exclusive, right? I don't think they can be, because what incentive do you have to be transparent with everyone if you're the only one who needs all the information? So in a decentralized governance format or structure, if you need help from the community to make good decisions, then obviously you have an incentive to give them the best data. Vice versa, if you control everything, then you don't really like why do you need to give the information to the public unless legally speaking you have to? Like there's just no incentive.
Well, you would be like required to do so by regulation. Yes, but normally you would not have to. Yeah, like in a lot of cases, I do agree, it would not be in your best interest, right? But yeah, that's why like maybe an outside authority.
Yeah, I just think that I think it's pretty hard to have a I think it's hard to have transparency when the forces are centralized. You also have more power, so you have way more to give up, particularly to your competitors that are coming up. If you are the number one market share in an industry, why would you want to give out that information? I think just touching on this centralized versus decentralized point, I think decentralized, I think bigger businesses or bigger governments or even just countries in general that have a lot of influence, they want to be more centralized because you want to keep the power tight knit and you want to be able to leverage that. I think what we see, particularly, I'm going to use crypto gaming projects as a specific example here, but I think when you have a smaller team, I think you actually gain a lot from having a decentralized governance format, because let's say you and I are just two developers, right? And we have no idea how to do business. Like we don't know how to negotiate. We don't know how to market. We don't know how to do any of that. The only thing we're good at is developing a game. So then what happens is if someone in the community that really likes the concept of your game and they have, I don't know, they might have other skills that you don't have, but you need. So for example, let's say someone who enjoys playing your alpha is a really big, or who has a lot of experience marketing, then by having a decentralized governance system, you can actually give responsibility to others. They'll also have a stake, which means they'll also start to have a financial stake, because obviously a lot of governance decisions is tied to the token with our current DAO systems. And you can start to leverage other people's skills in the community for free. Whereas if you're a Blizzard, like you don't need help from the community. You can just hire someone full-time role, or even a team. They've got that much money. You can get the best of the best and they come work for you. All the IP remains in-house. You don't need to share that information. You don't need any transparency. So I think that's a key, like when we look at it more so in crypto gaming, that's a really big benefit. I think as the project grows bigger, the less you want to be decentralized, in my opinion.
Well, so like, okay, you mentioned, so you mentioned there also for Roden, who just got back with us. So you're mentioning there a situation where, like we're just devs, we're just like, we have this game, but like we just don't know how to market it. And like it's still, we're trying to run a business. So yeah, we need someone who is good at marketing. That's part of, like, we need to sell a project. We need to like get our game out there. And you're saying as a, like, it's basically a startup at this point, right? Like, so we need like we need a marketing team. We need someone who is doing marketing for us. And you're saying like bringing someone on board, or like having someone full-time on board, like who's good at marketing, doing that. You're saying decentralized governance, so like maybe like someone from the outside helping with that is a better way than just like bringing someone on the team who's good at marketing.
I'm not saying
for such a key role like marketing.
I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying it's a new opportunity to leverage those skills. So that's something that so using Illuvium as an example, the reason why Illuvium has all these sub-councils is they just can't afford to have an in-house full-blown marketing team. They don't have enough funds to have an in-house balancing
they
team.
have like a this huge team, right? They have like so many employees. How can they not have a marketing team?
Well, they do have a core marketing team, but they have as Andrew Wall describes it, he prefers a decentralized marketing system. So obviously you have your core team of marketing people, but then if you give out a lot of the information, so I guess this is where the transparency is, it's very transparent. He gives you all the information that you need to create content on Illuvium, then you're actually getting other people to do the work for you, right? You're not paying them. Like, so someone like us, for example, right? Imagine if Illuvium just released all the key marketing data, any data that's relevant to marketing. We could do a video, we could cover it. It's beneficial for us. We're getting the information out to people and we're reaching a larger audience. And the good thing is Illuvium doesn't need to pay us, right? Okay, perhaps maybe they could implement a structure where they, have a reward system where content creators get rewarded. I mean, that's a completely
they
different
should
topic.
have that, right?
Yeah, which some projects do. They do have that. But what I'm saying is, yeah, you could see how by actually decentralizing and giving up a little bit of your IP, you might actually get something back from the community. Now, we haven't seen a long-term project that actually has been successful with this strategy, but theoretically it makes sense. Now, is it better than having an in-house marketing team? I would say probably not, right? Like if you get an in-house marketing team, you're going to hire the best people. They're going to, they have got experience. But I'm saying that it's not
more coherency.
Sorry?
Right? It's more coherency. When you have a team, there are like a few people. There's the same people who are having they are agreeing with each other. They're creating a common strategy. I would say that's way more efficient than I'm not sure how this works in practice yet in a lot of these projects like Illuvium or whatever, but it sounds to me like the danger there is just like have a lot of incoherency in the strategies. Like some people win this time, some other groups of people win this time, and you don't have like a linear, like nicely thought out, linear calculated strategy for the long term. You're basically kind of like doing a bit of everything because people are voting on different stuff of the time and other people are getting voted in positions of power all the time. So yeah, I think this, for me, this sounds like this lack of coherency, this lack of structure. It sounds like it takes more than it gives in this instance.
Well, I can give you
agree?
I can give you an example.
Go ahead, first.
All right.
I was just going to say very quickly, Scholars, that's one of my criticisms of it as well. I find that with decentralized governance, and it's specifically in the gaming world, with examples like Illuvium, you might come across a certain times where there's a lot of politics involved. It becomes political rather than strategic. Sort of like politicians, where you see a lot of politicians with great ideas and they start off with with positive thoughts about things, but then it becomes, how do I get elected? How do I get people to agree with me? And that's all of it becomes, right? So there's a potential danger for that rather than let's get what we need to do done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that. I mean, it depends on how you structure your marketing, right? And I'll give you an example of why sometimes having an in-house marketing or pseudo in-house is not great. So I've been hearing a lot of small businesses. So generally speaking, like a small business will not hire a full marketing team. They'll actually outsource it to a company that specializes in marketing, right? And the problem
like an
is
agency, right?
Yeah, like an agency. That's quite common. I think even like medium-sized enterprises, probably even some corporates do it as well. Larger corporates do it as well. But the problem with that is, particularly in this day and age, I've heard that a lot of these marketing agencies are not actually utilizing AI. And the reason why they're not utilizing or they're not pushing that technology to their clients is because they know they'll become redundant. And you can see how there's a misalignment of incentives. And basically, you as as the business employing those services, you get stuck in this echo chamber where they're like, no, AI is not going to be, it's not going to kill traditional marketing. Our strategies are better, blah, blah, blah. And you can see how, you know, from a business perspective, they want to protect their business interests by teaching, I guess, educating you with the wrong stuff. And whereas if you, let's say, use a decentralized marketing system, you'll actually get the approach of more people. Maybe someone is specialized in AI marketing, someone specialized in traditional marketing, and you can, you know, I guess, leverage a range of skills and not get stuck in an echo chamber. And then I guess to use an example of where a centralized decision didn't go so well. So recently with the Illuvatars.
Wait, before we move on to that,
yeah,
I want to like discuss a bit on what you just talked about, and to Dean in the chat also, like we should address some of the stuff he's saying there. But yeah, basically with your example, I don't really agree with the agencies that are not really leveraging AI because they want to keep you like more hooked to their services. But I don't think that's a thing, and I would not think it's sustainable, because at the end of the day, you're paying an agency, you're paying it to bring you results, right? Like that's what you're paying them for. You're paying to bring you results in terms of marketing. You don't know how to do marketing, where you're bringing them on, and even if they leverage AI, it's not like you can just steal their whole process. They don't have to show you the process by which they're leveraging AI. So I would not say like that they can, if they can bring you better results. If not, like another agency will come along that they are leveraging AI to bring you more results than the conventional agency, and they still get run over by the competition. So I think just like this argument, yeah, I don't really agree with the argument of like, oh, the current agencies are not really using AI because they're not incentivized. I think if they can use AI and get more results for you or their clients, they get a huge competitive edge. So I think they are kind of like actually incentivized to use AI.
well,
just on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, once again, it comes down to transparency, and once again, those marketing teams, they can not show you the process and just get you the results. But the problem is, particularly in small businesses, there's a lot of information asymmetry. So what you think is a good result might not actually be a good result in the entire industry. And you won't know that unless you actually are in the marketing industry. Once again, if we're just a couple of developers and all we know how to do is code, and you know, the first agency that comes to us goes, oh, we're going to increase your market share by 5%, and you're like, oh, fantastic. How much does it cost? Blah, blah, blah. But then you just know, but then there's other, you know, marketing agencies that are giving you 20%. How would you ever know? You'll get stuck in the echo chamber. They'll build a good relationship, yada, yada, yada.
You can ask or you can do some research yourself, right? Like you can ask other agencies. You can get offers for multiple agencies and see, okay, which one has a better offer.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, like I agree, in the long term, the industry will.
I don't think that's sustainable, right? Like just like, deliberately providing less results.
Yeah, correct. They will eventually weed out everyone, like all the bad marketing agencies that are not willing to adapt and change. They will get weeded out, obviously. But I guess the example is I've seen and heard a lot of small businesses recently that get quoted for these marketing agencies getting paid. You know, like I've heard there's in Australia anyway, in around our area, it's about $1,000 a week. And then, you know, some of them aren't even leveraging AI because they do go through some of the processes. And then, you know, someone else can do the same like that. And just to touch on Din's comment, I mean, we're not saying that blockchain governance is a way to get free marketing employee. I was giving the example of what one project, Alluvium, has been discussing about their decentralized marketing strategy. And yeah, like that stuff definitely exists. In terms of transparency and immutability, I mean, yeah, but once again, we're just talking about blockchain governance specifically. And I personally don't think transparency can exist without some sort of decentralized governance, because there is literally no incentive for a company, a government, or anything to be transparent if all the decision makers are central or core to the organization. Yeah,
and that's kind of like Okay, that's a fair point there, and that's kind of like what it comes down to, right? Like when it comes to the decision making, also like just like how the things are being run, the level of transparency. We're talking about like, is this organization run from exclusively by people from within the organization, or they are also like, or there is a level of impact from outside the organization, even if that's even just like monitoring them, even if it's just like, hey, being accountable to people outside the organization, right? I guess that's a distinction there if we are talking about like decision making and accountability, if we have that only within the organization or outside of it as well. Do you guys agree with this kind of like notion here of exclusively people from the organization versus like being at least accountable, if not also a power to vote to people from outside the organization as well?
Well, sorry, could you just like, so in simple terms, are you saying why should the organization
decentralized versus like, I'm basically trying to like make a more like another distinction between centralized governance, decentralized governance.
Yeah.
So centralized being people, it's basically the decisions being made exclusively by people within an organization without being like that transparent or accountable to the people outside the organization. And decentralized is like bringing more elements of transparency, accountability, and maybe even decision-making power to people outside the said organization. Do you think this is an accurate distinction there?
Oh, I'll let Vern go.
Yeah, for me, it makes sense. Yeah, like my thoughts on it as a whole, if I was to make a few comments on both distinctions, it would be that, and I think, talking about going and having a look at what Tutin said as well in the chat, and what we also touched on earlier as well, is that decentralization is at a basic level very important. Decentralization is very important. Decentralized governance, on the other hand, is something that I think only applies for certain things. Now, what those things are, I'm not 100% sure of. This is something that I guess is open to discussion. A lot of people are still not sure of as well. I think there can be some applications of decentralized governance, but I think within business and within development, you kind of need a bit of decentralization. That's my view. I know we weren't really talking about views, but that's kind of my view on that. I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree with that. But I think as a whole, going back to what Tudin said about decentralization, very important. It's that transparency and immutability is basically what blockchains are about. But I don't think that necessarily feeds into governance.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. That's more. Yeah. Okay. That's more like so you're saying again, like it's more of a feature of like, again, crypto, like blockchain technology, but not necessarily, like a governance. Is that it doesn't reflect necessarily completely in the governance, basically the governance of projects. And
I guess this also segues into issues a little bit. Sorry, Scuzz, are you going to say something on this? Because this also segues quite nicely with a few issues. That the main issue that I actually can see about decentralized governance, which is participation. But yeah, go ahead, Scuzz.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think governance necessarily like improves or increases the accountability for the core members. I think accountability exists in both centralized and decentralized, unless you're like a sole trader and you work for yourself, right? Like you don't really, like in a public company, you're accountable to your shareholders. You're not really accountable to I guess you're somewhat indirectly accountable to your clients and your customers. But at the end of the day, when you're a public company, the number one thing is to increase your profits for your shareholders. Now, obviously these days, there's all these social and environmental ethics. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, people are just doing this to virtue signal, or sorry, companies are doing this to virtue signal to increase their profitability so that the customer goes, okay, yeah, we're going to go and buy products from you because you are environmentally sustainable or you do care about social issues. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to profit. So I don't think accountability necessarily comes, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's purely done to, you know, like, yeah, that's my opinion.
Accountability kind of correlates with transparency, right? In a way. So the more transparent you have to be, the more you are accountable to like more people, right? Like the more people can see if when you're fucking up, and they can, hold you accountable for it through different ways, right? If you can have that in your system, in your incentive structure, but yeah, I guess there is. Do you agree there with the thing where like it's a measure? It's also correlated with transparency, like accountability.
Yes and no, because like if we look at the shareholder system, right? Like, okay, if it's look, I'm just theorizing here. I feel like if the regulation and the law wasn't there, a lot of that information wouldn't go back to their shareholders, even though they are the number one. So from a legal perspective, yes. But if it was like a free market, I don't think a lot of companies would be giving out too much information, even though there's a lot of people, even though you are accountable to a lot of people. You know, let's say you had 1 million shareholders. I think at the end of the day, all they will do is you just, you know, you're accountable to the person above you in a I guess a rigid authoritarian structure. So I don't know if it necessarily is hand in hand, but yeah, I can see your point.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Yeah, it does tend to increase it. And okay, Tudin said here in the chat, if we have a smart contract that rewards everyone for performing a certain action, and the contract is immutable, no owner, then that is governance. No, unless I'm understanding things wrong. So to that, I would say, well, governance, like the way we are defining governance here, is like more how the decisions are being made, like performing a certain action, but like who decides what gets written in that smart contract? Who like who decides what the reward everyone is getting? Like God. So there is like, that's kind of like more like higher level like governance. We're talking about like, okay, who makes the decisions in terms of like incentive structures, like what gets coded in the smart contracts, well, like who gets to direct the future of a project and how a project is getting run. Then the lower level things, the lower level like processes and systems are automated very well by the smart contracts and the incentives like reward systems. But we're talking about like, okay, what's a better way of projects being run nowadays? Is it more like who is making the decisions? And I have like, and if we can, maybe we should all like chime in on this and give our views. I'm quite a bit against like decentralized power. So again, we're talking about like centralized power, like a few, like a one person or like a small group of people having all the power decision making in that organization, versus decentralized. Again, to define things better, decentralized, it's more like more people. There's more like voting rights. We have this like Illuvian DAOs, or you vote for people who can make decisions. So basically, you're adding more people in the mix with I would guess the presumption or the hypothesis is that like more people equals better decisions, right? Like I guess that's at the end of the day, that's how I see it. That's the whole like idea behind this whole decentralization thing. Like we're taking the power from the few because we don't trust them with decision making, and we are kind of like, okay, keeping them with, again, more transparency, more accountability there. And we just don't trust them to do what we want to do, what is the best for us. So, even in a country, you would say like, hey, I don't trust the president. Maybe I don't trust the Turkish president, let's say, to do like what's in my interest. So I want some measure of control to his decisions. But so I think both systems kind of make sense, and there's like positives and negatives to both ways right? To both ways of running things. But I would say probably decentralization is a good way to, again, add more transparency and like be able to like double check people and to like make sure people don't go crazy. Maybe like maybe some people like in Turkey are running things, so they don't go crazy with power. They don't go like, hey, there's like zero accountability. This is how I run the organization. It's against your interest, but you cannot do anything about it. So we want to prevent that, right? Like that's what the bad outcome we want to avoid. But I would say the best way, I still my personal view is that the best way to run things is still in a centralized fashion, where it's like a small group of people at the top making the big decisions, people who are very, very competent at making those decisions. So like even like the marketing guy has a ton of experience, and like he knows better than like the random like 50 people who have some marketing experience in the DAO, in the decentralized DAO. Like he knows better, but there's so much extra friction that him trying to convince them every time of, oh, hey, this is a better decision, that I think that extra friction is not worth it. And I think the most efficient way is like have a small team actually, of very competent people who are running things. But the issue is you have to trust that team. And that's the danger, is like, what if you don't trust the team? What if you don't have the required transparency? But I think that the best way of functioning with the best results for the long term is having still a small team at the top who is coordinating things, who doesn't have to keep answering to the plebs, who doesn't have to keep justifying their decisions. It's like, hey, you are very good at this. You have been doing this for like 10, 20 years in your area. You're an expert. I trust you to make the decisions for me. In a decentralized thing, we're saying, hey, I don't trust you to make the decisions for me. I think I know better. Like I want to say in the future of this project, but I don't believe most people know what the future of the project is, like what the best thing for the future of a project is. And most people will be short-term outcome oriented. Okay, rant over. What do you guys think? Or if you have like a different view of this?
I think we can
Yeah,
all
I mean,
agree.
You go ahead, Rodin.
No, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead. It's all good.
I'll just keep it short. I think we can all agree that a hybrid system is always going to be the best. Too far centralized, too far decentralized. Cop-out answer, but yeah, I agree with Daniel. There's got to be some things that need to be centralized. We need to be efficient, particularly with big issues that can come up. It's like, once again, using Illuvium as an example, just some of the decisions just take way too long because they need to, first of all, a proposal needs to be written, then it needs to be discussed, and then it needs to be voted. If there's a time of crisis, we just need a group of people
let's actually, you brought out like a very good point. So let's compare that. Let's compare this decision-making process, right? With someone with like a competitor to Illuvium, and they don't have this whole thing. Like, don't you think they would just like smoke Illuvium? They would just like far surpass them because they are moving way faster, because they don't have this whole extra like million steps to making this decision. Do you agree with that, Skaz?
Not necessarily, because so I can give you an example of when this would be bad. So you have a small team, a small group of individuals, or a small group of, I don't know, organizations that need to make a really quick decision in a time of crisis. They deploy that decision, whatever it may be, and it gets received really poorly from the community. It's already been implemented. It's already, the system's up and running. I don't know the exact example, but we're just talking about it.
Yeah.
Then it's like that could kill the project. That like one day of split decision making could just kill it. In contrast, and once again, Illuvium has proposed a lot of bad proposals that could have ruined the project. But because the community can get in there and stop and block those proposals from coming to life, your general public doesn't ever hear about it because it got blocked by the small group of council members. Like Arbitrum is a good example, right?
How many council members are there in Illuvium? Do you know?
Oh, there's a lot. They have a lot of they have sub councils for marketing. They have sub council for game design. They have a sub council for meta. They have, there's like a sub council for bloody everything these days. So yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, volunteer. Actually, they get paid, so it's not really voluntary.
Okay.
But yeah, that's an example. I like something that I remember Immutable made a really, really bad when they first were coming up. They made a really bad I forgot what it was. Adiza, do you remember when you and I and Jez, we got pretty outraged with one of the decisions they made? It was a very simple fix. If they just brought it out to the community and the community just said, no, that's a bad idea, it would have saved them. I mean, that being said, they're doing well anyway, but I remember it was a really bad, they did something really bad.
I can't remember.
I do remember something about
Obviously
this,
not
but I
that
also
bad if we
don't
can't
know
remember.
the details.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a lot
Just
of
a quick
good
comment
things.
though. I've just got a quick comment for you guys just on that whole governance and decentralized governance kind of slowing things down. It's a problem. It's a problem with a lot of large corporations as well, right? Where you've got such big pyramid structures where there's so many layers of decision making that need to be made before it goes to the top for a decision. Do you know what I mean? And this is this is what I learned when I was in the corporate world working for a tobacco company. And they were dealing with all of these new vape guys on the block. And then a few of the larger managers, when I was having a chat with them, were telling me, well, all of these young kids making these vapes and all this stuff to compete with us, they just decide to do something and they'll fucking try to do it the next day.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, we need to go through 20 layers of management and it slows us down.
Yeah.
So I do agree that that's an important factor to consider. But I also think that for certain companies, like for Illuvium, I don't really see it being as much of an issue because even though it's going to slow decision-making down, at the end of the day, what they're making and what they're creating is very individual. It's not like they're in a very competitive market. Like, look, I shouldn't say that. Gaming is a very competitive market, but for what they are trying to create, it's more of an individual. It's very specific. It's very niche, right? So it's not like that they have to compete with new products that are coming out exactly like Illuvium in the next few weeks because they're not competing with that. They're competing with games, they're competing with trends, they're competing with those sort of things. But that's the short-term growth is really not on their agenda. It's more medium to long-term growth. So I think that for business models like Illuvium and game models like that, it could be a way of doing things. I don't think it slows them down too much. But this once again is another thing that segues into issues, is that with the slowing of things and slowing of decision making, the reason where it could become a problem for crypto and blockchain based gaming is that these guys are run out of money. Like it's not infinite money. They can't just go and raise money in the open market, or they can't just raise money very easily, especially because it has such significant market cycles of being fucking booming and then busting and booming and busting. So that in that sense, there is a point there to be made about a governance slowing them down to the point where imagine if you had to vote on every small decision and it takes weeks to pass something and weeks to agree on things and you just lose money.
Actually, so yeah, let's I want to bring like 2 points of view here, like two different models of making decisions and like iterating and like moving forward. So what you said earlier, Skaz, and like what you're referring to now as well, Rodan, is basically we're talking about like how do we make the decisions, and there is like two ways of going through like decisions and like moving forward. So one is like for every decision, let's say like the decisions are very important. So like we are in an environment, maybe crypto gaming is, maybe it's not. We are in an environment where every decision, if we make a mistake with it, it's actually kind of irreversible. It's actually pretty bad. That's when, we need a lot of double checking. We need more like slow decision processes because small decision can have big consequences. Like the decision can have big consequences, and let's spend more time on a decision and slow everything down because we want to really make sure we are making like the right decisions. But I think there's this other model that we're actually seeing it a lot in like Elon Musk and the way he runs Twitter, where you actually make a lot of decisions fast, you are implementing fast, and when you fuck up, like, okay, that was a fuck up, let's just actually readjust. So you get feedback from after the decision is being made, because you're not really ruining the company. You're actually, oh, okay, actually that didn't work. and let's actually backtrack on that. Let's readjust and like let's be flexible and dynamic with the way how we run things. So I would see these as two different ways of running things. Again, like spending a lot of time on every decision, or that idea of like failing fast. Okay, we do a lot of decisions. We like really, like you said, the vape kids, we bring a lot more like agility to our decision-making process, and we can, we can learn from our mistakes. And I kind of see like, what do you guys think? I kind of see like this other one of like, hey, don't spend too much time on a decision. We can always like readjust and like take feedback. Okay, this did not work. But at the end of the day, if you compound it after like 1, 2, 3 years of doing things like this, I would say the guys who are making faster decisions and are adjusting based on the feedback, the immediate feedback they get from the community, the clients, the customers, whatever, I think they get further along than people who are spending a lot of time on each decision, because it's hard to know how the decision will impact your product, people, the market, whatever, before implementing it. So I feel like from decision making specifically, we are talking about like these like two models where it sounds like this slower decision making process is maybe like the decentralized model. Do you guys agree there? And
Yeah.
I will let you guys answer that because I have to go to the door really fast.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's hard to say, and I actually agree with RDZ with regards to, I think it depends on the industry. You bring up some really good points about in a very competitive industry where things are changing very quickly, then yes, I would agree that a centralized structure is probably going to perform better. But I also like the idea that you're like, yeah, well, you know, they're in a space that not many people want to enter. Illuvium specifically, they're in a space that not many people want to enter, so they have a bit more time. I guess the only thing you do is you really just piss off the people who are super keen to play the game. Bringing it back to crypto gaming specifically, I personally think a lot of business decisions should be handled by the core team, and game decisions is where players should get a lot more say. Personally, I actually think
perfectly agree.
Personally, I think players would actually know the game better than the devs. Once again, just because you're good at coding a game doesn't necessarily mean you're good at game design. Just because you're good at making art for the game doesn't mean you're good at game design. Generally speaking, the elite players, the top pros, are going to know the game way better than the developers. And I think that's where you should bring the community forward a lot more than, say, business decisions. Because let's be honest, most people don't own their own business. Most people work for someone else. Sure, they might know some structures in place and whatnot, but at the end of the day, they're not making executive decisions like, I guess, the founders who, you know, if you've been running a crypto gaming project for 2 or 3 years, you probably had to make a lot of tough decisions and you learned from your mistakes. So from a business, from crypto gaming specifically, business should be through the core team and game decisions through the community. RDZ, do you want to maybe make a comment on that? Do you agree?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think there are a lot of benefits in certain contexts. And yeah, you raised a really important one in crypto gaming, which is listening to those elite pro players, listening to those experienced guys that have been playing since the game's been released, who have been engaging with the community. I think in that context, very, very important. And I think there are a lot of games that do that. But I guess it's just that their influence is not as strong, and they don't have like an official way of doing it. They don't have like a clear way of doing it. And that's what blockchain provides. It provides a more clear way of listening to those experienced gamers and actually listening to your audience.
Yeah.
With
actually,
the issues. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I will not sure because I got my groceries. I always get my groceries during these meetings. So I think I don't know if that was still the topic, but what you mentioned there, Skaz, I think it's a very important distinction in terms of getting feedback, getting again the decision making. Okay, helping that out on the gaming front. So on the game front, because people who are playing your game 5-10 hours a day are better probably at giving you like gaming, like, okay, how do you improve the game? Like giving you game feedback than a lot of the developers. So do you guys think it's fair to distinguish, hey, like, let us run the business side and the game is the product side, right? Like give us feedback, like, hey, like let the community get involved more in the product side, which is the game itself, and the business side, like, okay, how do we develop it over time, the marketing, everything, the big decisions. Let us run that. You guys run help us run the product side. And that's maybe like a way better scenario than you guys help us with the business side as well. Do you guys agree with this?
Yeah, definitely. I think to me, that seems like the clearest day way to do it. I'm happy to be proven wrong. We haven't really seen, I guess, the only real crypto gaming project that I know that has an insane amount of decentralization and a lot of governance to the people is Illuvium. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform in the near future. The other game that I play quite a lot is Gods Unchained, where they take a more basic approach with their governance model. So you can come in and you can propose things about the game, but generally speaking, there's not a lot about like, oh, what should we price the next boost expansion? I just don't think that's relevant to the community. And like I said, I maybe Illuvium is so ahead of its time, and in 5 years' time we all look back and we go, oh, that's how is not every project doing that? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we discussed quite a bit, like quite some good stuff. I think we can actually conclude this section on like with decentralized versus decentralized, and like taking the good things from both. And I would say probably this model that we came to, it's actually a pretty good conclusion for this. If we have some case studies to talk about here, some specific case studies with like blockchain projects, like crypto game projects implementing some governance.
One of the main issues that I wanted to actually talk in the issues section, but it also ties in with case studies as well. And this is that right now, when you actually look, I guess it is really case studies, so it makes sense that we're talking about this. But one of the big issues and case studies within blockchain right now is when you actually look at a lot of the project DAOs that exist, especially on Ethereum. So a lot of these DAOs first originated from Ethereum anyway. So there's a lot of very old school OG DAOs that have been around since Ethereum's inception, and in a lot of them, there is really low participation. So you may have a fantastic system, you may have governance that is fair, equitable, decentralized, and that actually isn't like Arbitrum and works, right? They don't fuck you over. But one of the biggest problems that you're going to come across, and one of the biggest problems that we see right now, is participation being so low. Like I'm talking about, under 10% participation rates, under 5% participation rates, like ridiculously low participation rates. So when you have situations like that, where you might have a really great model, you might have hit it on the head, then one of the biggest challenges that you're going to face as a DAO is, how do we get people to vote, right? Because right now, what it's showing is people aren't voting, and we're not even talking about game ones, because you can make the argument that for games, people aren't interested in voting, they just want to play the game, right? But we're talking about actual DeFi models. So most of the ones that I'm looking at Ethereum.
So that's the thing you're touching on here, right? Like even like people don't even want to, like, right? They don't even
don't even want to. So even if it's not in a game. So as I said, in the game you have the argument of whatever they want to play, but in DeFi they have a really, the voting matters a lot to what's happening to your money, right? Yeah. Voting is actually quite valuable in that space. Yes. People are still not voting.
Yeah. So would you say this is more? Do you think this whole like, let everyone like have a say and whatever? comes more from this like idealistic space of like like basically an idea that like, oh, this sounds very good, but like this sounds very good in theory, and like, yeah, of course everyone should like direct our project or whatever, but in practice it doesn't actually work. People don't really care, but it's just more like sounds good, but it's actually in practice it's not really that good.
I don't want to say that it's fully like that, that it's all idealistic, but there is definitely elements to it. That's definitely the reason why you
like, are we reinventing the wheel for no reason here? Are we like, is this like, oh yeah, like just like do everything from scratch and like just doing like a whole nother way instead of like, hey, what's currently working, what's not currently working, how can we improve on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I feel like there's definitely an element of reinventing the wheel, because this is more of a philosophical. It kind of gets into a bit of philosophical chat as well. But when it comes to decision making and certain types of decision making, are people really going to let their power go? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
are we really going to see?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think yes, I do think. Well, again, yeah.
Sorry, let me rephrase that.
Abstract.
I mean, are people that want the power really going to let it go?
So actually, okay,
right?
So yeah, that's actually a good point. I would say most people would say no. Most people would say like, hey, no, I would not want to let my power go. Like, I would not I would not want to let my power in other people's decision making. But in practice, I think 90% of people, I'm just making this number up, obviously, 90% of people plus, they actually do want to be led. They do want like the responsibility of having your own life,
think about it,
of like having you to make your own decisions in life. It's actually a huge, like a big responsibility, and a lot of people would actually just give that away to like, hey, have a job, have a boss, let society tell you what to think, let media tell you what to think. I would say if you look at actual reality and how people actually behave, not what they say, I would say a lot of people are just don't have like, they don't have any issue with giving the power away, even like on their most important resources like time and like their direction in life.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. I actually, my phrasing of the question was wrong once again. I was more thinking of the people that have the power. I don't think they would let it go that quickly, because I do believe that they also think about what you're saying of most people don't want it. Most people don't know what they're doing. So why bother even offering that power?
Yeah, and that's these case studies you're talking about, like here, this case studies, like it shows that, right? Like a lot of these DeFi projects were like, hey, like you said, like, hey, a lot of you, like, you're putting money in this, you have money in this, and your decisions can have quite a bit of impact in the direction of our product, of our DeFi product. A lot of money is involved, and people still like, whatever, like
they're not doing it. Yeah.
I think
it takes effort, right? Go ahead, Scott.
It does.
I think it goes a little bit further as well. Like, I think most people just don't know what they're buying. Like, I mean, Gala token is a good example, right? Everyone who talks about Gala talk as if the token gives you ownership, it gives you governance, it gives you, some sort of utility, but it just gives you nothing. And I think that can be applied to other projects where someone might buy, like, I don't know, like some sort of DeFi token, and they don't even realize that they have the option to vote. So I think it's also an education system where people don't actually realize they have the power to vote. And, once again, coming back down to RDZ's point, are the founders or the people in control, particularly at the beginning of a project, do they actually present that information? Like, do they even advocate for that? Maybe in theory, it's like, oh, hey, you guys have governance, but we're not actually going to tell you or remind you that you have a lot of power because we want to make sure that the early decisions are to us. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but I definitely think a lot of the reasons people don't vote is because they don't actually realize they have the ability to vote with the tokens that they hold or even the NFTs that they hold.
Okay. Fair. So yeah, it's not in their interest.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of reasons. Like people are lazy, people are just not interested, people don't know And it also, I guess it also comes down to a lack of education, right? Lack of understanding what you invest in. In my recent short, not to, this is a bit of a fucking tangent, but my recent short was about celebrities and celebrity scams, where people are buying these crypto tokens because celebrities are shilling them, and celebrities are saying, "Oh yeah, no, this is good," but they don't know what they do, and they don't know what they're actually putting money into. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of these DAOs, and Arbitrum being one of them as well, where people don't actually understand that that's all the token does. It's worthless otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other case studies to discuss here in this section?
Well, yeah, that was more of a broad case study of all of them. Like all of the DAOs that I saw on Ethereum have this in common, where it's all under 10%, under 5% average participation rates, which is just so low. I think we've already discussed the two main forms of DAOs that were sort of one that was more negative in Arbitrum, and then one that was more positive in Illuvium. Those are still the two examples that I always use. Even though Illuvium's positive, it still has its positives and negatives to it as well, and a lot of unknowns. Which also, I guess, leads us to future predictions. And I think when it comes to something like governance, blockchain governance specifically, and if we're going to talk about gaming, which obviously we should, it's something that hasn't been invented yet, in my opinion. I don't think that anything on the market right now is good enough. And I know that comes from a bit of a judgmental point of view, because what the fuck do I know about governance? But it's just from what I can see. Like there are there's quite a lot of unknowns in Illuvium, and I just don't think that with that many unknowns they have a system that is right. So I'm assuming a lot there. And then when it comes to other forms of governance, we've seen how wrong they can be, because it's very easy to lie that you're actually have a decentralized DAO. So yeah, I think it's something that hasn't been invented yet. I think it's still going to take a lot of experimentation, because it's sort of like the history of democracy. There wasn't just what our view of democracy now is something that is very, very different to how democracy started, because of the changes that were made over time to democracy. And I more mean that in a way that's not the definition of democracy. Definition of democracy has remained the same, like the definition of decentralized governance, but the way it's implemented, it takes years and years of almost adding to it, failure, success, etc., and we're just too early. I know this is the fucking term that we use a lot in crypto. We're too early, this and that, but it actually is right, in the sense of we're not going to get a system that is perfect, because there just isn't enough examples of it. There hasn't been enough experimentation done on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just with the point of being early, it's such an interesting concept, right? So many, like everyone that, well, not everyone, but a lot of projects that come in and want to create, they want to revolutionize everything. Why not just make a small improvement in just one department, let's get that nailed, and then someone else will come along, build on top of that, and then someone come along, build on top of that. Like, that's my only issue with Illuvium, is like they're trying to be revolutionary in every single department. Yeah. They're trying to be revolutionary with interoperability with the game, their gaming assets. So then they're giving you 100% revenue distribution. Then they're giving you, look,
because they approach it. It sounds like they approach it, right? Like they approach it, like you're saying, it's like they approach it like, hey, we're not building a game here. Instead of like, hey, let's look at the gaming industry and let's actually build something slightly better by incorporating crypto elements. It seems like you're saying like they are taking the crypto industry and like, hey, let's build a game from all this like crypto craziness. Is that kind of like?
Well, it's more so they're just like, let's just like fully revolutionize every department. Now, look, these guys, I would say, I would definitely say they're a lot smarter than me, and they probably thought about it's probably an EV thing, so expected value for those of you guys who don't know. So if you make a small improvement to an already existing industry or framework or whatever, then the value is not going to be that great. Whereas if you nail like this 10-part revolutionary thing, even though you might succeed like 0.5% of the time, the payoff might be a lot better, right? So maybe they're thinking in that perspective, and I could definitely see why they would do something like that, because at the end of the day, when you start a business, let's be honest, okay, sure, you might be passionate about the products, you might be passionate about the service, but at the end of the day, it's all about profitability. So you want to do something that has the highest EV or the highest expected value. So maybe the highest EV is to just go full crazy and just go, let's revolutionize everything that can be possible with the current gaming industry. And let's try and execute that, because if we do, we actually just hit super hard.
Yeah, exactly. I can see the merit behind like an approach like that. It's just like high risk, high reward, right? It's just like if it does work out, which is a small chance, like you said, because like you said, they are doing a lot of things very differently. They're trying to revolutionize a lot of things, and most likely it will not work out. Just by like definition, but because you're trying to like this, like the gaming industry does work. It is a huge industry. It's not like you're fixing something that's like, hey, like this gaming industry is in shambles and like we're just gonna like bring it all up again, make gaming great again. No, this is like a huge industry. It's probably like you guys mentioned, like it was bigger like than the music industry and the movie industry.
Yeah, movie and music industry combined, and that's
combined,
like multiples on it as well. I forgot the exact number, but
that's insane. So you're kind of saying like, hey, still, I think this is broken. I think we need to rebuild this from scratch. And I think that's kind of a risky thing.
But the problem is, Daniel, though, it's like the gaming industry is controlled by a very, very small few studios, right? So if you are trying to tap into that gaming market, you have to do something pretty crazy to break in. You can't compete with Activision. You can't compete with Microsoft. So there actually is an issue with the gaming industry, not for gamers, but for developers. I think that's the key point.
So so what you're saying here, Skaz, just gonna point at you here, and the viewers. What you're kind of saying is like, hey, we are talking about the traditional automobile industry, and the only way to break in is to be the electric car. You want to be like the Tesla, to like disrupt the whole industry. And that's how you compete with the other guys. Because if you're trying to make just like a general, just combustion engine, whatever, if you just like gasoline, whatever, like a normal car, it's very hard to compete with General Motors, whatever. It's like the big brands, Mercedes, whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
So you're trying to like say, okay, let's build something very different. We cannot compete with these guys. Let's try to like rebuild everything from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good analogy. The automobile industry, like you can't beat a Toyota. Like what? Like Toyota's, I think they're rated like one of the most reliable cars. Their cars are designed to last 30 years. Like, okay, like why would you try and compete with a brand that has been around for like God knows how long and quality is the best? Like that's pretty hard to beat. So then like I guess you're right. The electric car is a perfect example. It's like, okay, well, Toyota doesn't have electric cars. Why don't we give the market electric cars? So I think now I think about it more, that's probably what Illuvium's original idea was. It's like, we can't, like, Microsoft has like, and they're about to acquire Activision Blizzard. Mind you, Activision Blizzard is actually not as big as I thought it was. But Microsoft is like half the market share, maybe even bigger. And then they get that. It's like, okay, now they're at 65%. And then Microsoft just buys out all its competitors, which, let's be honest, that's what big tech companies do, like Google. They just buy their competitors out. Facebook just buys their competitors out. And then so it's like, okay, well, how do I actually compete in this market when let's be honest, if you're a developer and you get bought out, if you're financially driven, then that's a great thing. But you don't get to hit the 10,000x.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. I want to get some Marek, you've been hearing us ramble here. I want to get some predictions from you of like how do you think in the future this governance will look like? Decentralized, centralized, a mixture of both. How do you think this looks for the future of crypto? What's your opinion on that?
I haven't been speaking at this meeting because I'm far from being an expert or even anywhere near competent in this
That's why I asked you something
topic,
at the
but
end after
yeah,
we spoke.
yeah. So basically the thing I can most relate to is what Rodan said a few minutes back, that we don't have enough examples to see what's working in reality and what is not, and how how good ideas turn out to be not working in practice. So
Yeah.
if so, I'm basically clueless about how it will it could look in the future. But if you really if you really want me to take a guess,
Yeah.
then I would say that I don't know how to put it.
Do you think more towards
in
decentralized or more towards centralized?
Yeah, I think some level, or in practice, some level of centralization will always be there, because if we leave it to the like to if we leave Wild West basically to the community.
No, but it's the people, Marek. That's
everyone
leave the power to the people.
Will be trying to. You guys hearing me or?
Yeah. I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead. Can you hear us? Or not? I don't know. Or he just like turned off the mic and like like you would like plug out the internet. But no, yeah, like I get it. Yeah, it is too early. I'll say it is too early with all of this.
Oops.
Yeah.
My connection froze for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. So if you want me to continue.
Yeah, if you can finish your point.
Yeah, I was about to say that some level of centralization will be there, because if we leave everything to the community, like in the Wild West of crypto, then everyone will be trying to find some everyone will be constantly trying to find new ways to cheat. So and some of them will be successful. So
yeah.
So that will probably put an end to any trials of full decentralization, of fully decentralized DAOs and stuff like that. So I think I cannot say much more about that, because, as I said, I think we need to let some developers and companies and projects do their stuff and see what's working, see what's not, see what's getting exploited, and those things will probably be constantly evolving into some better versions of those DAOs, stuff like that. So
stuff like that. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm seeing in the chat here to deal with the with the play to earn revival talk here. Yeah, let's see. I'll say like right now big issue from my point of view with play to earn is like still legislation. How are you gonna are you really gonna have kids be able to like play with money on the internet, earn money on the internet? I think there's like some legal issues there with gambling regulation, KYC stuff. So yeah, we'll see how how play to earn goes, I do think it has a lot of challenges. Obviously, it's a nice concept, but I think that it does have quite a few challenges. From my end, in terms of like the future, like some predictions here, I still believe. Well, so obviously, like a model for the future would be like something that takes the best things from both the centralized governance ways and the decentralized governance ways, and minimizes the negative impacts from both, right? Like it's like kind of a probably they probably both have merits to them, and it's more like a gradient from centralized to completely decentralized. And I would say still, the optimal model for me now, like that's what I believe the future will be, is mostly centralized with some aspects of decentralization, again, for transparency, for better incentive structures, and keeping people in check. But I think still the best decisions will be made by a small group of people, like Roden mentioned earlier. And I see that as well. I heard that in many times in big organizations. Once you have the power diluted down, the decision-making power diluted down so much, it basically freezes, it paralyzes a lot of the decision-making. It makes it a bad thing for the organization. So yeah, I would say for the future, the optimal model should be probably still mostly centralized with some aspects of decentralization, some beneficial ones. What do you think, Roden, for the future? Some predictions here, if you did not touch on that.
No, I mean, as I said before, I think it hasn't been invented yet. It's something that needs to be developed, and it's something that comes with time. I think it's going to I agree. It's definitely going to be a combination, because there are advantages and disadvantages to both sides, centralization and decentralization. And I think as we've discussed in this live stream, I think it also depends on the industries. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
What it is, what type of products that you're releasing, what you're competing in. And I would like to think it's Illuvium, because that would make us rich. But the Illuvium is competing with a very big industry, very, very significant industry, as Gus said, bigger than music and movies combined. So there is a lot of financial incentive to create a new system and invent a potential new system.
Potential gains are also very big, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's one to look out for. It's one to consider. I think it's also a question for the whole "we are early" thing is also a question for blockchain in general, because I know a lot of people like to say that, and sometimes we can be skeptical of that, because if you actually think about it, blockchain's been around for a long time. Technically, since 2009. So you've got 14 years of development, a really, really long time it's been around for. And with ETH, it's been around for obviously less, but the real steps forward are still being worked on. You have the simple forms that have been around for a while. When people say, "Oh, it's been around for so long, nothing's been done," it's because it's been evolving into what it is today. And I think there's still a long way to go with how it evolves, because at the end of the day, what we have now is still not good enough, and it still doesn't work, and we know that, right? So what does that mean in simple terms? We're still early. And maybe that's just me copium, but I do believe that there is a future when it comes to technology like this, and that the same goes for governance. I believe there's a place for it.
Yeah. I like it. Okay, Skaz Senpai, what are your thoughts here? Wrap it up for us. What are your thoughts for like the future?
I'm gonna go out with something a little bit different. I'm gonna actually give you guys a crazy future prediction, which I don't know if it's actually gonna happen, but it could happen. Sporting organization where the players that are recruited are picked by the fans. I'm calling it. It's probably well ahead of our time, but I also don't think that organization will win a lot of championships. But I think for the development of fan base and sport, I think that'll be an awesome option. We already kind of see it with the NBA All-Star.
Oh, so I mean, actual sports, not esports.
I mean, esport, maybe esports as well. I just feel like sport would make more sense, and everyone gets to pick. Like you get a selection of players. They're like, all right, guys, we've got 5 strikers here in football. Who should we recruit? Bang. And I think that would create an insanely cool economy. Once again, I don't think it would lead to a lot of championships or premier, titles, but I think it'll be a cool concept. And I think from a purely monetary perspective, that business model would pop off, because there would be some really rich whales that would pay a lot of money to get a governance token for that sporting organization to have their say in which players get played or get recruited to the club. Pretty left field, but that's I'm landing us with that.
That's pretty fucking wacky, but I love it, because it's not only commercially very good in terms of people buying the votes, but I think it's also commercially insane because of the viewership. Imagine the amount of people that would be re-engaged and more interested in sports when that is the case, when their players that they're voting on and they're trying to bring onto the team are the ones that are playing in their games and for their teams. And then imagine also when things start, changing, and when things start maybe not going as planned, the viewers watching and wanting to make decisions while watching and discussing, and I think it brings that a completely different element to sports where viewership could potentially go up. In saying that, viewership could also potentially get cooked as well, or go down, because of a less successful space, like less successful teams, as you said, Scuzz, because let's be honest, a lot of these voters are probably not going to make correct decisions, and that could also lead to viewership potentially going down in some cases. But I think overall, you've got the double commercial side.
I mean, we just real. I know this is going to tangent a little bit, but just real quickly, we already see how important things like fantasy football, so rare, even DraftKings and all that kind of stuff, that would be a completely new dynamic to sport, which I think would be commercially successful. But whether that be long-term sustainable, I'm not too sure, because if a team starts to play shit because of the decisions, people probably lose interest. So anyway, that's my left field future prediction. 20 years from now.
Yeah, it's wacky. 20.
I don't know. I don't think we're going to be alive 20 years from now, but...
Alive?
Yeah, I was about to say.
What are you talking about? I don't know how old you are.
Dark, man. My granddad's literally 98.
That's my prediction.
I'm going to live till 98 at least. How the math goes.
Yeah. Okay. I like the prediction. I like... There's definitely, I would say there is some chance to that. I like it. The true decentralization of sports, getting people involved. Okay. Good. Well, let's wrap it up for today. I think we've had a good discussion. We've reached some, I would say, again, good conclusions. Good, just like from bouncing ideas back and forth. I am learning a lot. I know I am learning a lot from these things. Hopefully, you guys watching are also learning. Just again debating things back and forth. It does make you just understand things better. But when it comes to governance, probably we've seen obviously the whole way blockchain governance goes, involving the values we have from crypto and stuff, decentralization, again, the whole Web3, the whole voting things and all of this. We haven't seen very good examples of that, but we've been saying here, we are still pretty early. We'll see how it goes. We are definitely seeing a lot of incentives, not just like a lot of arguments for still some degree of centralization for sure. That's what we've hopefully coming with like a balanced perspective for you guys, a critical perspective. That's what we're trying to do here. Gameonomics, just being critical, just saying the plus and the minus, not always just not being like hype boys, not being like just shilling stuff and just seeing one side. We're trying to see both sides, negatives and positives. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, we have plenty of other videos going into these kind of topics, showing you way more, especially about crypto gaming. So feel free to browse around, shop around. This is our role here: bring you some crypto gaming education, bring you good concepts to talk about, and just gonna wrap it up cleanly there. This is Daniel, Gameonomics, signing off. Subscribe, like this video, and let us know what you think about governance. What is the future there?
Thanks, guys.
Peace out.